The topic for today is rise of nationalism. We'll look at the broader reasons why nationalism arose in India and then go into some of the specifics. So, first of all, the major reason why nationalism came in India, how did India become a nation, is because something unified us. There was some sort of unification because if you look back in history, we had the Guptas, we had Mauryas, but once the central kingdom went away, it got fragmented. It went into various kingdoms. And there was no unity, there was no India as a concept. How did that concept come? That came because of unification. And this unification happened because of a lot of British policies that they did for their own good, but which, you know, created this unity for Indians. Apart from that, there was some sort of contradiction between the Indian interests and the colonial interests. Then there was Western education. The press and literature, which played a very important role in spreading the ideas of nationalism. The study of India's past. Other world events. And as a reaction to various British policies. Now, coming to each of the topics, okay? Unification. Now, as I said earlier, it was all fragmented. And what happened is when Britishers came, they took up territories from the north of India, northeast of India, west of India, south of India, and they called all of that British India. Now, there was a unification of the various territories that were part of the South Asia. Okay? So that is one reason for unification. Another reason is that there was administrative unification. So when all these territories came under the Britishers, okay, there was the same government that was ruling over all these people. Same government means same laws, same institutions, same civil services examination that you study for. But at the same time, they also had a common enemy. See, imagine back in the medieval times, okay, you have 10 different kingdoms, and the 10 different kings will be doing things in 10 different ways, and the discontent of the peasants or the zamindars or the local people in the state would be particularly against the ruling of that particular king. But that's not the case here. You go 200 kilometers south, 300 kilometers north, everybody has discontent with this government. That means we have a common enemy, and most of you might know the importance of having a common enemy. Common enemies instill some sort of unity in the people who see that enemy as their common enemy. And that was a major reason for increasing the nationalistic sentiments. That happens even today. For example, there are, for example, when two countries are fighting, okay, let's say the USA and China. Now, US people might have a feeling that China might be a common enemy of the entire US. And that creates a nationalistic feeling. Or for example, when we have the India-Pakistan match, Pakistan becomes our common enemy for that match, right? So during that match, you have a lot of nationalistic sentiment. Why? Because you have a common enemy. You have a common enemy who is a team from Pakistan who the Indian team has to defeat in the cricket match. So these kind of things, right, they create a sort of very motivated feeling of unity among the people. Now, after this, we have railways. Now, why did British get railways to India? Is because British wanted to easily collect raw materials. Okay, it was for its own business. But what did railways do? What railways did is it broke geographical barriers, and it also brought in a lot of equality into society because different classes were traveling together. Because British didn't care about upper caste, lower caste, like rich and poor. British just saw Indians as one group, okay, who they didn't really like actually because they were humiliated, they were insulted. They put all of them in the same trains, in the same compartments. So people spend time together for a very long time, and people were able to go from, let's say, south to north, which was earlier very, very difficult. Apart from railways, then we have telegraph. Now, what a telegraph do is send you It lets you send messages just like how now you can WhatsApp. And what did that do is it created unity. Leaders from different parts of India were able to communicate with each other, and that is why it was possible for us to have meetings like the INC, because people knew that okay, there's an organization like this and I have to go there. They came there, using the railways, and they got to know about the other leaders in the section because of the telegraph. And how can all these people talk to each other if you don't know the language? India has hundreds of languages. It was only possible because of the introduction of English by the Britishers. English made sure that somebody in the south is able to talk to somebody in the north, or somebody in the west is able to talk to somebody in the east. Imagine a Gujarati talking to a Malayali today. Now, both parties will not understand anything, but because English was there, we were able to communicate with each other. And finally, because of this territorial unification, let's say if there's not enough, there was an economic interdependence that came about. By that, what I mean is, let's say if there's a famine in one place, and because there's railway and everything is connected, another place would also suffer. So that also created some sort of interdependence. They could relate to each other's problems, they could relate to what is happening around them. So, just summing up, they unified the territories, there was administrative unification, the same government, there was railway introduced, there was telegraph, there was English language, and finally there was some sort of economic interdependence. That is about unification. Now, coming to contradiction. Now, contradiction, the moderates for a very long time believed that the British rule is actually good for the country. Even when you look at the middle class intelligentsia during revolt of 1857, they did not completely support the local rulers, neither did they support British, but at the same time they didn't want British gone right then and there. That's because they knew that British was the symbol of a lot of liberal ideas, modern ideas of democracy, representative institutions, liberty, equality. And they actually got inspired by these ideas. They wanted these ideas for India. And that is why, in books such as Poverty and Un-British Rule, authors are so sad in a way that it is. So, what the book says is that there's poverty and un-British rule. British rule is good, according to many, but there was un-British rule followed in India. And why was there un-British rule? Because Britishers were not following their own ideals in India, rather, they were following their colonial interests in India. And they found out a contradiction between the Indian interests, Indian aspirations of freedom, of social equality, political freedom, etc., and the colonial interests who only wanted profit. And they understood this because of theories such as the drain of wealth, books such as Poverty and Un-British Rule, so on and so forth. So that created a contradiction. You understood that Britishers are not going to do anything for you, or their interest is not to make it better for you. Their interest is just to get money and go. Then comes Western education. Again, Western education was introduced by Lord Macaulay. Why? Because he wanted clerks. He wanted people in the administration to help, because he couldn't speak the language of Indians, or deal with the Indians, because it's difficult, right? They're from different cultures. So he introduced Western education. But what did Western education do? Is it introduced Indians to Western ideas. They read, let's say, Rousseau's ideas. They read ideas of representative institutions, of liberty, equality, fraternity. They got to know about events such as the French Revolution and so on. So they got introduced to so many Western ideas like democracy, and they thought, why are we not getting these ideas? So it introduced them to Western ideas, and this introduction later leads to the Indian Renaissance. Just like we had the Reform and Renaissance in England, this led to the Indian Renaissance, the spirit for scientific temper and for social reform, and that also led to a lot of social reform movements. And this is where the middle class intelligentsia comes to arise, and they then become the pillars of the national movement. Then we have the press and the literature. Yes, it's similar to telegraph, but telegraph is sending it to individuals. But press made it possible for Indians to spread mass propaganda or do mass education, like mass media, mass communication with the people. And press. Another significant thing is that the vernacular press has started to come up. And also a lot of leaders used these press. For example, examples of Tilak's Kesari and Maratha, about how they were used to spread a lot of ideas and teach the people, educate the people. Now, why did when Gandhi came to India, when Gandhi said, we have to do satyagraha for Swaraj, a lot of people already knew Swaraj. But it was only because of the press and the literature that was being written at that time that people understood ideas of democracy, self-government. It's difficult to teach people who probably didn't have a lot of education all these ideas, but this was possible through press, especially vernacular press, and through literature, for example, works of Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, other patriotic writers, and so on. Then, the next point is about India's past, the study of India's past. It is during the British time that we learnt a lot about the Harappan civilization. We learnt about the Mauryan age. James Prinsep deciphered Ashoka's script. We understood about the trade relations that Guptas had, the Kushanas had. And we were actually surprised because we didn't know this. What the Britishers told us is were barbarians and we came and we made it, better for you. But that was not the case. We actually had a rich history. We were rich. We had a very rich culture, prosperous nation. And then what happened? And that's when people realized that, oh my God, there's something wrong. And that's when people, got a sense of self-respect of being an Indian. And they said that, you can't subjugate us. We shouldn't be suppressed. We actually had all this and something went wrong. Right? It is not what we are believing or we are made to believe by Britishers that is true. There's something more glorious about us. And that created self-respect. And adding to this, adding fuel to fire was people like Swami Vivekananda who went around the world telling the world about the glorious past of India, telling the youth about glorious nature of India, which really aroused a sense of nationalism, self-respect. You become proud to be called an Indian, and that helped in the rise of nationalism. Then again, world events. There was ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity that we understood from the French Revolution. There was also events such as the German unification, the Italian unification. Let's say Bismarck, the efforts of Bismarck to get Germany unified. And these efforts influenced the middle class intelligentsia to unite India, to get us also free. Finally, one of the most important things are the reaction to British policies. So now, if we look here, the Indian nationalism rose because of two major reasons. One is as a result of British policies, and that is what we discussed till now. All these were British policies. The unification was British, administrative unification, the Western education was a British policy, press was introduced by British, study of India's past was done by the British. Okay, so these were all result of British policies. But now comes another section where nationalism arose also because of the reaction to British policies. Now, how did this happen? When certain governors took certain actions, it created a lot of discontent among the people. And this discontent later led to the rise of nationalism. So let's discuss some of them. So there is, the first one is Lytton. Lytton was the Governor General. And what Lytton did, or I think Lytton, so he was a governor of the British East India Company. And what happened is he introduced some laws or some acts which created a lot of discontent in Indians. One example that I can give you is that he decreased the age of Indians to write civil services to 19 years. Okay, so now you need to think about the scenario then, that civil service exam could only be written in England, and they had to study a lot of British things like the language. I'm not sure, but I think they had maybe Latin or Greek or some sort of languages, some sort of British ideas, which is very difficult for Indian children to learn. Okay, and also being a very collectivistic society, we don't really let our children go out at such a young age. And if the maximum age to write the civil service exam is 19, that is putting too much pressure on the children of India or the youth of India. So this created a lot of discontent, and that was exactly what Lytton wanted. Lytton didn't want a lot of Indians in the civil services. But it created discontent. There was a lot of protest. The Indian National Association did protest. Then a lot of people who wanted to join the civil services, they protested. That created issue. Then in Lytton's case, next we had the statutory civil services. Now this is a very interesting concept. Okay, it's called the statutory civil services. So usually civil services is when you write an exam and you get the job. But statutory civil services, what Lytton introduced, you didn't have to write the exam. The Viceroy could nominate you, okay, and you will become a part of civil services. So what Lytton thought was that he'll make these amindars and all the rich people in India, the aristocracy of India, nominate them, add them to civil services, and become friends with them, right? Because then the Britishers will get be friends with the most powerful people in India. But what he didn't realize was that being part of civil services was actually a middle class aspiration. The aristocrats didn't really want to be part of the civil service. They had enough money and they had their own way of living, their own prestige. They didn't want civil services to get any sort of prestige. And this backfired. They didn't join, you know, and that was a failure. That also led, and you know, by doing that, it was unfair to a lot of other people who were studying and writing for the exam. So that might have created discontent. So, and the statutory civil services was abolished later in 1892. Okay. Then the third thing that Lytton did was Delhi Darbar. Now, when I think Queen Victoria took over in England or some celebration, he conducted a Delhi Darbar. Now, his intention was he knew how rich the Indian kings were at that time, or Indian parties or Indian kingdoms were. He wanted to show that British is no less. Okay, British is also glorious and British is also rich. But he did that at a very wrong time. He did the Delhi Darbar, he spent so much money on food, on decoration, everything, when actually India was going through a famine. And this created discontent because in one place you are dying, and the other place he's spending so much money just to celebrate the victory of somebody in England. Definitely that'll create discontent. Then we had the Vernacular Press Act. Now this is very important. What this was basically to suppress the vernacular press. There were certain restrictions put on the local language newspapers, and this again backfired. Most of the local language newspapers converted itself to English, and you know that also created discontent because they understood that the Britishers are trying to suppress us. Now these were some of the policies of Lytton that created discontent and that led to nationalism. One was reducing age of civil services, the introduction of statutory civil services, Delhi Darbar during the famine, and the Vernacular Press Act. Then we have the next governor, who is Ripon. Now, related to Ripon, Ripon was actually a much more nicer man to Indians, okay, and he introduced something called the Ilbert Bill. So at that time, Indian judges were not allowed to hear cases and make judgment on Englishmen, like when English prisoners or like convicts came to the court. Now he thought it was unfair. Ripon, very nice man, based on the concept of equality back in his country, he thought this is unfair. Indian judges should also be allowed to, make judgment on English subjects, not English subjects, but English victims or English people who have committed crime. Okay, yeah. But what happened was, when he passed this, it hurt the sentiments of Britishers. Britishers are like, how can an Indian make a judgment against my people? Or how can an Indian make a judgment against a Britisher? How is this even possible? And that created protests back in India, back in England, and the British Parliament had to struck down this law and say that, an Indian can't hear, but if the person who's convicted wants like 50% of white judges bench, then they will be given it. So, for example, if I did some crime, if I go, I have Indian judges, I can say, no, I don't want Indian judges to make a judgment on me, I want 50% white judges. Now that showed Indians how much of a discrimination that the Britishers had against Indians, about how the concept of equality, concept of liberty, democracy, all those ideas does not apply to Indians, right? They just discriminated against us, they just did not like us, they never thought of us as equals. Okay, so that was the Ilbert Bill, and this Ilbert Bill controversy came up, and later, as I said, the Parliament had to change the law, and this made the Indians understand that, look, Britishers are not going to change. They don't like us, or they discriminate against us, and this is 100% visible at this point of time with the Ilbert Bill controversy. Then we also have policies of Curzon, about Curzon's partition of Bengal, and how the partition of Bengal fueled the Swadeshi movement, and that is a stage where we see the coming together of leaders, coming together of actually protests starting, and so on and so forth. So this is the short story of Rise of Nationalism. Again, a quick summary is that Rise of Nationalism happened because there was a unification of India, and this unification was due to various factors. such as the administrative, political, and economic unification that Britishers did, the introduction of English, railways, telegraph, all that. Then it was also because the Indians understood that the Indian interests and the colonial interests are very, very different. It is because of Western education that led to Western ideas being introduced in India, and also social religious reforms. Then the introduction of press and literature, which led to mass communication and mass education. The study of India's glorious past that led to self-respect in people. The world events that influenced us, such as the German unification and the Italian unification, and reaction to British policies, such as policies of Lytton, Ripon, Curzon, so on and so forth. So these are the reasons for the rise of nationalism.